The Black Death. In 1347, Messina, Sicily, Genoese trading ships pulled into port from the Black Sea, bringing the bacterium Yersinia pestis. The plague, which originated in Central Asia, was carried by fleas on black rats, which spread the disease, though recent research suggests its rapid spread across Europe was often driven by human ectoparasites like lice and human fleas. Victims suffered high fevers, chills, and the appearance of painful, pus-filled black swellings called buboes, starting in the groin and armpits. Death usually followed within days. During this time, the breakdown of social order across Europe was complete. Families abandoned their sick, and the dead were so numerous that authorities were forced to create vast mass graves, overwhelming every city's capacity to cope. The plague eventually subsided around 1351. The initial wave between 1347 and 1351 killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people, wiping out approximately 30 to 60% of Europe's total population in the hardest-hit regions.
The 1918 Spanish flu. In March 1918, in Camp Funston, Kansas, USA, a U.S. Army cook named Albert Gitchell reported to the infirmary with a severe cold, headache, and fever, quickly followed by hundreds of soldiers showing the same symptoms in the camp's barracks. This highly virulent strain of H1N1 influenza was spread worldwide through mass troop movements during and after World War I. Victims suffered high fever, severe aches, and chills, but most critically, the lungs filled with fluid, causing patients to turn blue and effectively drown. The disease notoriously targeted healthy young adults between 20 and 40 years old, a demographic usually resilient to flu. Hospitals and morgues were utterly overwhelmed globally, forcing cities to implement strict mask mandates and public gathering bans to slow the quick, shocking deaths. The virus eventually mutated into a less lethal strain after the third wave passed in 1919, allowing the global population to develop immunity. The pandemic infected roughly 500 million people worldwide. The death toll was estimated at 50 million to 100 million people globally.
The Antonine Plague. In 1655 AD, Mesopotamia marked the entry point of this disease into the Roman world before it spread to Rome in 166 AD. The sickness, which historians widely believe was primarily smallpox, was brought back by the victorious legions from the Parthian campaign. It was rapidly spread by the returning Roman legions across the empire's vast network of roads. Victims suffered fever, chills, severe diarrhea, and the painful development of pustules. The plague severely weakened the Roman army, decimating its ranks and forcing the empire to recruit less reliable mercenaries, a failure that contributed directly to a long period of imperial decline. The outbreak gradually subsided, but recurred frequently over the following decades. The estimated death toll is 5 to 10 million people, with some areas of the empire losing up to a quarter of their population.
The third cholera pandemic. The mid-19th century was the age of steam and industry, but beneath the progress, a killer lurked. This plague began in 1852 in India, spreading globally to the great industrial cities of Europe and America. It was caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, which spread rapidly via steamships and was primarily transmitted through contaminated water sources. In overcrowded cities with primitive sewage systems, human waste seeped directly into drinking water. Victims suffered massive, uncontrollable watery diarrhea and vomiting, leading to rapid, extreme dehydration. A person could turn blue and die within hours. The severe outbreaks in major centers like London and New York persisted because the cause was initially unknown. People believed it was bad air, until Dr. John Snow famously mapped an outbreak in London and proved the disease was waterborne by tracing the source to a public pump. The disease was eventually controlled through massive public health efforts and the implementation of modern sanitation. Globally, the pandemic is estimated to have killed well over 1 million people.
The Cocoliztli Epidemics. In 1545, New Spain, when the first wave of this catastrophic plague began, returning again in 1576. The disease, which indigenous people called Cocoliztli, the Nahuatl word for pestilence or plague, was likely a severe form of viral hemorrhagic fever. It spread rapidly through the already weakened native communities. Victims suffered a high fever, headache, black tongue, and most gruesomely, bleeding from the eyes, mouth, and nose. Death was typically rapid and certain. The mass mortality events caused the complete collapse of native civilizations as the population had no immunity to this devastating new threat. Outbreaks eventually ran their course, but the population remained fragile. The 1545-1548 epidemic killed an estimated 5 to 15 million people, accounting for approximately 80% of the remaining native Mexican population.
The Russian flu. In 1889, Russia and Central Asia where the first modern global influenza pandemic began. This strain was conventionally identified as H2N2-like influenza, although recent scholarship has debated whether it may have been caused by the emergence of human coronavirus OC43. The virus was able to exploit the new, fast global transportation network, specifically the widespread use of railroads and steamships. These rapid transit systems brought the infection to every continent in a matter of months. Victims suffered high fever, severe prostration, and pneumonia. The pandemic demonstrated the severe vulnerability of an interconnected world, causing massive labor shortages due to widespread illness that happened almost simultaneously across continents. The virus eventually became less virulent and herd immunity developed rapidly. The pandemic is estimated to have killed around 1 million people worldwide.
The Plague of Athens. In 430 BC, Athens, Greece, where this devastating plague erupted during the Peloponnesian War. The disease was brought into the overcrowded city through its port, Piraeus, which was the main hub for supplies and refugee entry. The sickness was not the Bubonic Plague, but an unknown, highly virulent disease. Modern debate continues, with strong evidence supporting candidates such as typhus, smallpox, and a viral hemorrhagic fever. Victims suffered a sudden onset of high fever, bloodshot eyes, and a terrifying burning sensation, followed by violent spasms, relentless thirst, and agonizing sores. The worst moments involved the total collapse of Athenian society and morale as laws were disregarded and the sick were left to die in the streets or burned on communal pyres. The outbreak continued in waves for several years, ultimately killing 1/3 of the population and decisively weakening the city-state's military power. The estimated death toll over the course of the plague was 75,000 to 100,000 people.
The fever of 1557. In 1557, Asia, where this devastating global influenza pandemic is believed to have originated, the sickness spread through ports and trade routes, reaching the rest of the world within a few months. The first documented cases in Europe occurred in Naples and Rome, carried by sailors. Victims suffered a severe fever, headache, and a debilitating cough, often leading to pneumonia. The worst moments saw mortality rates skyrocket in densely populated European cities, overwhelming hospitals and cemeteries. The rapid global movement of the disease highlighted the vulnerability of the interconnected world. Even centuries before steam travel, the outbreak subsided over the next few years. The estimated death toll for this global pandemic is unknown, though it caused higher burial rates and widespread economic turmoil.
The Philadelphia Yellow Fever Epidemic. In 1793, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, then the capital of the United States, the epidemic began when refugees and ships arrived from the French West Indies, unknowingly carrying infected mosquitoes. The disease, yellow fever, spread rapidly through the city via the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which bred in the city's standing water and summer heat. Victims suffered high fevers, chills, severe aches, jaundice, and internal bleeding, often vomiting black matter. The worst
moments saw the collapse of the municipal government as George Washington and much of the federal leadership fled. Doctors had no effective treatment, and the dead were buried in mass graves. The epidemic subsided only when the first frost arrived in November, killing the mosquito population. In a span of just 4 months, the fever killed approximately 5,000 people, about 1/10 of the city's population.
The Great Plague of Seville. In 1647, Seville, Spain, where this devastating outbreak of the Bubonic Plague began. The disease was carried by ships arriving from North Africa, spreading quickly through the port and the surrounding region of Andalusia. The sickness was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. Victims suffered high fever, delirium, and the painful formation of buboes in the groin and armpits. The plague led to the total paralysis of public life, with massive food shortages and such a shortage of healthy labor that the dead were often left in the streets. Religious processions and crowded ceremonies meant to implore divine aid actually accelerated the spread of the disease. The outbreak subsided in 1652, but the region was left economically and demographically shattered. The epidemic killed approximately 150,000 people in the region of Andalusia, with Seville losing up to a quarter of its population.